morning, everyone. It's Andrew. Could someone please type in the chat if they can hear me? Someone not from State Budget Division? Okay, thank you. Let's give it just another minute or two to get started. I think we have two ASL interpreters. I made you presenters in the list, so if you want to see if you can um, turn your cameras on.
Hi, this is Allie, one of the ASL interpreters. Can you hear or see me?
Yeah, I can hear and see you now.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Oops.
This is the other ASL interpreter. I just want to make sure you're able to see and hear me as well.
I can hear you. Are you Dana or Dan?
Yes, Dana.
I can hear you. I can't see you right now.
Okay, let me try turning my camera off again. How about now?
No.
Okay, let me try leaving the event and coming back. I'm not sure because I'm able to see myself and Allie, so I'll come back. Let's try that.
Okay. Allie, is it okay if we get started in the meantime? Are you okay with that?
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to operating budget training for fiscal year 2026. I'm Andrew Miner. I'm the director of the State Budget Division, and we have a few other folks from the State Budget Division here with us today. So if you have any questions as we are going through, please please put them in the chat, and they will answer them as we go through things. So congrats on everyone making it through another session. As you know, the budget was just signed into law by the governor on Friday. And so we are, doing this at the first possible day after the bill became law. But I know that it's very tight this year just because of how the windows kind of worked out with the session. So if you've got about 2.5 weeks to get everything turned in, but the good news is basically everything is ready to go. BFM is ready and waiting for you. So we just want to thank all the state budget staff and everyone else who helped us get to this point and give you as much time as possible. So let's go ahead and get started.
Andrew,
So,
just real
yeah.
quick.
Yeah, sure.
The other interpreter, Dana, needs the permissions granted now since she left and came back in.
Okay. Okay, hang on one second.
Okay, are we able to see and hear me now?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, thank you.
Can't hear you. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so by statute, your budget submission is due Thursday, May 1st by the end of the day. And like last year, there's no paper copies of your budget submission are required. So you're going to follow a similar procedure as you have in the past year or so. Can someone from State Budget please put the slides in the chat? Thanks. So you're going to put together one complete submission of your operating budget for the checklist of required items that we'll be talking about here in a minute. Scan it in as a PDF and label it with those labels that you see there, BU, and then your business unit number, FY26 operating budget submission, and then you're going to email it to the 4 email addresses you see there. So your state budget analyst, the DFA submissions email, your LFC analyst, and the LFC submissions email. Okay, so you're going to send it to those 4 emails, and then of course you're going to submit your budget request in BFM as you have normally been doing over the past couple years. Okay, just a reminder of a couple other deadlines. May 7th, that's the deadline to submit your account maintenance forms to FCD if you need to do any new department codes or anything like that for FY26. Be sure to get those in. And then position control transactions, if you are creating new positions, deleting positions, stuff like that, get those in as well. Okay, and then our website is updated. You can see it there. It's got, I think, pretty much all of the forms that you need for FY26 are updated. So go on and click on there. And then once we will record these trainings, and we will have a recording of the training posted there as well, probably by end of day tomorrow or so, or Wednesday. So you'll be able to go back and refer to the training as well on the website. Okay, this is just a reminder of the checklist of all the forms that you need to submit as part of your operating budget. Of course, some of these forms might not apply to you depending on the nature of your agency and its budget. So this is, all possible forms that you might need to include, but just make sure that you are including everything that you need to for your budget. So you've got kind of 2 groups of forms here. Reports generated from BFM, you see those on top, like your S1, your S8s, S9s, all that stuff that we'll be talking about. And then down below, reports generated outside of BFM, so coming from elsewhere, like the board certification, if you have a board that needs to approve your operating budget. S2, which is just your organizational chart, other recon forms, and stuff like that. So make sure that you include, again, everything that you need for your budget submission. This is just a reminder of how the operating budget submission process flows. So it's going to start kind of at the report 3 that's generated from BFM, and you should be seeing that come in your inbox from your analyst soon. If you haven't already, you should be getting it by tomorrow. And it's basically just a summary of your section 4 recurring operating budget that appeared and that was passed and signed into law by the governor in House Bill 2. So that kind of forms the basis of your budget. You'll use that to generate OPUD 3s, which become journals, OPUD 4s, which are for non-recurring appropriations, and general fund allotment requests, which are requests to receive general fund cash that you'll also submit with your budget request, your operating budget, and we will send them over to financial control so that if you receive general fund or a few other funds that DFA controls, they'll be part of your operating budget. You'll receive that money. Again, your OPUD 3 becomes budget journal entries. So we will basically take those OPUD 3s, turn them into budget journals, load them into Share, do a final review and post them in Share so that by July 1st, you will have your operating budget loaded into Share and ready to go. And then that's all done by July 1st, and then you will be ready to go to conduct your fiscal year 2026 transactions. Okay, so all of this needs to happen between now and June 30th. And of course, we are here to help you facilitate that. And like I said a minute ago, BFM is now available for agency use. So you can get in there today and get started with everything that you need to do. This is just a reminder of how the workflow works in BFM. We kind of go over this every time just because I think people are getting pretty used to it by now, that BFM is a couple years old. But just to remind you that the level of access that you have in BFM determines what forms that you can see. So if you're a small agency and you have levels 1, 2, 3 access, you have every access, then you should be able to see all forms at all stages, right? But if you're working at a larger agency where you have different levels of access, then you can only see forms that you are working on, right? That are at your stage. So if you do the work that you need to on a form and then you submit it to the next stage at your agency, you can no longer see that form, right? Because that has gone to your supervisor, manager, whoever, to actually start working on those forms. So just that's something to keep in mind, that once you advance forms past the stage that you have access to, you can't see those forms anymore. Now, if you need to review the data, you can always go into BFM reporting and print off, the S8s or the S9s or whatever reports that you need to see. So the data doesn't go away. You can still look at it. You just can't actually make changes to it if it's currently not at a stage that you have access to. Okay, so that's just what to keep in mind here. And then, of course, every budget form that you need to submit for your agency needs to be at stage 23 to be included in your agency's budget submission, which is stage 24. Okay, that's the final stage of submitting your budget, stage 24. I already talked a little bit about this, but this is the report 3, which your state budget analyst will be providing to you if they haven't already. It'll show your recurring appropriations in House Bill 2, Section 4, which is the section of House Bill 2 that lists all your recurring budget. Hopefully, you've been reviewing the House Bill 2 and you're already pretty familiar with it, so nothing should be as a surprise. I can tell you that there were no line item vetoes that affected Section 4 appropriations in House Bill 2. So basically, your Section 4 budget, as it appeared in the past version of the bill, is it. Okay. I'll show you approved FTE, and then it'll also come with a comment sheet. This comment sheet that your analyst has completed for you will list basically everything in the budget that is relevant to your agency. Any sort of non-recurring appropriations, any special language, your compensation distribution amounts, bar authority, all that stuff will be listed in your comment sheet. So please make sure to read through that. That way you know everything that is in the budget that affects your agency. And also, if there were any sort of line item vetoes, those will also be reflected in your comments sheet. So you'll be able to see, okay, this was what was struck by the governor and how this affects me. Okay. And this is just a reminder of when you have completed everything in BFM, how to submit your budget. So whoever is the level 3 or kind of top agency user at your agency will be responsible for submitting the budget in BFM once everything is done and ready. So you'll go to the 9900 form, and we'll show you how to do this later on when we go into BFM and show you these forms. So you'll only see your agency name, your business unit. You click on the header button. That will pull up a form where you enter in some information like contact info and stuff like that for whoever's submitting the budget and signing off on it. So you fill that out. That'll be used to populate the S1 report. When you've got that in, you click on the submit tab and then submit other entire budget. Then you select, there's a drop-down menu. You select submit to DFA/tech review and then submit again. And then you're good. Then it'll be done. Okay. So after May 1st, that's when your state budget analyst will be reviewing your budget submission to make sure everything was submitted correctly. And if there's any sort of issues or adjustments that need to be made, they'll contact you. Please work with them as soon as possible, very expeditiously. That way we can take care of any issues before we sign off on every budget, basically, and load everything from BFM into Share and then post your budget journals. And we do that all together. So we need to have every agency signed off on before we do that. Okay, so very important to work with your analyst if they come to you and say, can we work something out? They see that found this issue. Okay. So of course, there are two sides to every budget, expenditures and revenues. So let's talk first about the expenditure side of your budget submission and what you need to do there. So this is done on the 7600 and the 7700 form. So if you budget at the department level in BFM, which is really only a handful of agencies, you'll be using the 7700 form. Everybody else will be using the 7600 form, which is by P code. So every P code in your agency has its own 7600 form. Here you see an example of a P541 for a DFA, and this is what their 7600 form would look like. So there's a lot of different columns here. As a general rule, just remember the columns that have little asterisks that you see there that are also highlighted, drawn with the box there. Those are the columns where you enter data, right? So everything else is either like an informational column or like a sum column, okay, a totaling column. So the asterisks are where you actually enter in changes in numbers. So let's talk about some of these columns here. The PCF projection column. This is your projected FY26 PSEB costs using March HR data. It's actually going to be April because I think Ralph just pulled it last week or so. So as recently as possible, it'll be your kind of projected PSEB costs using data from Share HCM. Keep in mind this is informational and planning purposes only, really, because it's not like you can't change your PSEB appropriation total, right? It is what it is, as was passed in the budget. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of what your estimated costs are going to be in FY26. Okay, then you see your 25-26 GA OPPA. That's going to be the line item budget as approved at the final legislative stage. So you'll see it broken out by line items as it was passed. Okay, so then what do you do with that? So there's, like I said, there's three columns here where you can enter in some numbers. The first one is 25-26 account transfers. So this is where you can adjust budgets at the line item level, okay, not the category level, right? Because you cannot change the categories. That is what was appropriated by the legislature. You can, more or less for planning purposes, adjust things at the line item level. Okay, so if there's too much in, for example, 520-100 exempt perm positions, you can put in a negative on the account transfers column. Let's say that's too much, right? So it's $100,000 too much. So you put a minus $100,000 in the account transfers column for that line, and then you need more money in the term positions column in their row 520-200. So then you balance it out by putting plus $100,000 in that term position number in the account transfers column. Okay, so this is how you adjust your line item budgets within a category. Okay, and you can check, because you see at the top there's a row where it says C200 transfer balances, C300, C400, etc. Those need to all be zeros when you submit your budget, because that means whatever you have subtracted, you have added elsewhere, and the category balances out. Okay, so if those are all zero, then you're good. Okay. You might find, especially if the legislature at some point in session put some extra money into your budget, usually above and beyond what was adopted by HAFC, so usually the LFC recommendation. If at some point, like in HAFC catch-up cleanup or incentive finance or whatever, the legislature puts some more money into your budget, it's possible that they just put it in kind of these base category line items that you see there, 520-000. If that happened, that's not an actual line item in your budget, right? That's not tied to any sort of like perm salary or type of contract or whatever. So if you've got money in those kind of base line items, please move it out of there. Okay, so just subtract out the whole amount that's in those base line items and put it into, it doesn't have to be all in one. You can spread it out among the category line items as you need to. Okay, so don't leave any dollars in those kind of baseline items. Okay, next column to talk about is the comp package. We'll be talking more about the comp package in greater detail later, but here what you need to know is this is the expenditure side. So whatever you're budgeting for the 25-26 comp package in that line, in this P code, just enter in the amounts for the right expenditure lines, right? So perm position, perm salaries, group insurance, retirement contributions, etc. So just enter in your expenditure amounts for the compensation package. Okay, and then next is other adjustments. Mainly, this is going to be used for federal adjustments, of course, for the expenditure side of federal adjustments. Remember that you can adjust your federal budget from what appears in House Bill 2, Section 4. Okay, this can be up or down. So be sure that you reflect that correctly here if you're going to adjust the expenditure side of your federal budget. And of course, you're also going to need to reflect that on the revenue side, which we'll talk about when we get to that portion of reconciling your budget. Okay, the only other reason you might use this column is for gap adjustments. Gap adjustments are very rare, and it's generally to fix some sort of technical issue that appears in House Bill 2, such as an unbalanced transfer between agencies or something like that. I would advise you not to use this column for that purpose unless you talk to your analyst first. Okay, if you think you might need to have one of these transfers, reach out to your analyst and we will work with you to make sure it is done correctly. Like I said, these are very rare and usually can't be done. Okay, a few more columns to talk about here on excuse me, on the 7600 form. So the next column here is your 25-26 final appropriation to share. So this tells you what the category totals are going to look like on your OPUD 3 and therefore your share journals, your budget in share. So that's what's going to actually populate your journals. Next is recurring adjustments. Do not use this column at all on the expenditure side. Okay, this is only going to be, this is for prior years for junior bills and such. There's no junior bill this year, so do not use this column on the expenditure side. Leave it blank. Okay, and then the 25-26 is your final numbers that will carry through for the 27 request. Since we're not using the recurring adjustments column, it'll look exactly the same as the final appropriate to share column. Okay. Justification. This is a text field where you can enter in any details of adjustments that you've made. One thing we do want to see is basically if you're doing some sort of other adjustment, using that other adjustment column, then please put some explanation of that column, adjusting federal grant or whatever, and be detailed as you can, like which federal grant are you adjusting here, up or down or whatever. So put some details in there, especially if you're doing those kind of other adjustments. Okay. And then just a reminder that all dollar amounts will automatically be rounded to the nearest 100. And that's just because that's just how we budget, right? That's how your appropriations appear in the House Bill 2. We never go out to exact dollars. And so therefore BFM automatically rounds things. So don't bother trying putting in exact numbers like the example here, $123,741. It'll just automatically be rounded to the nearest 100. Okay, so save some effort. Just keep numbers rounded to the nearest 100 here. Okay, so a question here from Art. To clarify, we are to adjust the base amount and spread the other amounts to zero out the baseline. Right, so if you've got amounts in those 520, 000, 530, 000, or 540, 000, if you have any numbers in there in the GAA OPUD column, you should subtract those out completely and then distribute them out in the category below that, right? So if it's a 5.2, then everything should be distributed out to the 5.2 lines and 5.3, 5.4, okay? Just a reminder here that vacant positions are projected at midpoint, have single insurance plans. This is again is for your personnel cost forecasting and just tells you how that PCF column is populated. Reminder, it's there for budgeting and informational purposes, but we pull information from HCM, but we don't put it back. Right, so it's a one-way street. So nothing in BFM in terms of like HCM information, personnel information is ever going to go back into share. It's just pulled for informational purposes. Also keep in mind that the HCM data won't include the 4% compensation increase. So you will be adding 4% basically on top of that. FTE maintenance forms. So again, this is another form that's depends on whether or not you budget by P code or department. You budget by P code, it's the 7900 form. Department, it's the 8000 form. So here's where you need to adjust or reconcile your FTE counts among the PCF, the current year OPBUD, and next year's operating budget. So if you had new positions kind of approved or funding for them approved, make sure that's reflected in the final OPBUD. And you see here the column that's circled there, the 25-26 OPBUD adjustments. I didn't update the pictures for this year, but trust me, all the numbers, they all say 25-26. So you're good to go. Only the numbers have changed. So yeah, enter in your adjustments in the OPBUD adjustments column, and then please, provide some justification. 2 new positions approved in this department, funding for this position approved in this department, or moving a position from one P code to another different P code, deleting 2 positions. Just put in some details about what you are doing with your FTE in the justification column. And you see there the report that's associated with this form that you need to print out and include with your submission. Okay, so yeah, just make sure that you kind of what we already talked about, making sure you reconcile any differences or how your FTE have changed since the appropriation request and from your FY25 operating budget. So we kind of already talked about what to do there. And then term extensions, right? So if you have term positions, then you need to include, there's a spreadsheet on our website. And this is, used to be you had to include a PARF form or something for every single term position. You don't have to do that anymore. That's too much work. There's one spreadsheet that you fill out and you list all your term positions on them. And you basically sign off saying, yes, based on our approved operating budget for FY26, we have sufficient funding to support these term positions in FY26. So make sure you complete that Excel spreadsheet and include it with your operating budget submission if you have term positions at your agency. And again, that form is on the State Budget Division website. Does this mean we can still add unapproved FTEs? It depends on whether you have funding for them. Let's put it that way. If you did not receive any funding for them, then no, you can't have more FTE than you have funding for. If you have permanent general fund funding, then we can look at, supporting some FTE from that, or term funding, or you can add term positions. So, but generally you can't add more FTE than you have funding to support them. So, or if you have any questions about that, reach out to Monica and we can help you with that. Funding such as commercial fund. Generally, if it's something like that, then it would probably be a term position, since that's probably not a permanent level or permanent revenue. So we could possibly look at making some term positions supported by that. Okay, so GSD and Do It expenditures, these are your rates that go back to clearly way several months ago. The GSD and Do It rates, such as workers' comp, property insurance, liability insurance, unemployment insurance, telecom, all that stuff, right? So all that stuff that you kind of filled out as part of your appropriation request, it's all been carried through on all these line items. They might be exactly the same. They might have had some adjustments as they work their way through. You just want to check all those rate line items, make sure they are either consistent with what you requested according to the schedules, or if they need some adjustments because, maybe you got some more FTE in the budget, and those rates that are tied to FTE, there are certain costs per FTE, then those should be adjusted correctly as well. Okay. For HCM assessment, that is $350 per FTE. So make sure that's right. And of course, it's just a reminder that because these are necessary expenditures, you have to pay your rates, then you should encumber all the budget amounts for them on July 1st, 2025. Just a reminder to do that once you get your budget uploaded to Share. And just use the appropriate account code to distinguish them from outside vendors, right? And so you see the lines, the account codes here in the last bullet point. We ask that you go into BFM reporting and create an S13 report. And I'll show you how to do that later, but basically it lets you create reports that are just based on any specific line items that you want. So if you can create an S13 with those certain line items and include that with your budget submission, that allows your analyst to check and make sure that you're budgeting appropriate amounts for those line items. So create and submit that. Okay. Question, how do OPUD 4s that are only appropriated for FY25 get budgeted? Those are non-recurring appropriations, and we'll be talking about that a little later. Okay, transfer reconciliation. So if you don't have any sort of transfers in your budget, either from either internal from one P code to another, or from one agency to another, then you don't have to worry about this form. If you do, then you want to go to the form 7400. The good news is that these tend to not be adjusted very much from the request. So unless there were changes that happened to your transfers during the legislative cycle, you probably don't have to do any changes here, although you definitely want to go to this form and make sure everything still looks good, okay? Because they've all been brought forward from your request. They've been brought forward all the way through the legislative cycle. So you want to go here, check everything out, update things as needed, very similar to the 7700 forms. There's, again, like I said, there's likely a few changes will be needed, but you can see here the information regarding the sending P code, the sending fund, the sending account, the receiving P codes, and then your transfers over here to the details, the numbers, and the amounts and all that stuff over to the right. Okay, so just check and make sure all of this stuff is accurate. And then there's a report to include. Again, that's the R2 transfer report output receiving. So you'll print that report again if you have these transfers in your budget. And this is on the expenditure side. Okay, so those 500 category transfers on the expenditure side. And this is just a reminder of the different 500 category transfer expenditures that you might have in your budget. So there's 3 line items that we tend to use in the 500 category. 555-100 is for non-reciprocal interagency transfers from one agency to another agency. Non-reciprocal just means there's basically no agreement or contract or MOU between the two agencies about how that money is supposed to be spent. It's basically kind of no strings attached. Like one agency sending money to another agency, or one P code in your agency to another P code. in your agency. Oh, sorry, that's for 555-106. Okay, so that's a non-reciprocal transfers within your state agency. So from one P code to another P code, that's 555-106. And then last 555-200 is non-reciprocal transfers to a component unit of the state. So those are pretty rare. Component units are entities that are considered part of the state, but they are not in share. Okay. So like the universities and things like that, they are component units of the state. Real quick, this is for only about 5 or 6 agencies that receive Land of Enchantment Program Fund appropriations. So this is, you might remember last year, this is complicated because the Land of Enchantment law says that these distributions are technically for 2 years, which makes budgeting them in your Section 4 recurring budget, where almost everything else is annual, it makes them very difficult to keep track of, or to basically to budget and then keep track of these remaining balances or whatever. And it was very complicated. So we simplified the process, and this started with the request, right? So this should be nothing new if you've got these Land of Enchantment Fund transfers. This is just a reminder of how we've kind of brought them forward into the operating budget. So they're budgeted normally in the appropriate P code budget. They should have Section 4 language for saying where these transfers are. Again, this is ED, DCA, MNERD, Ag Department, and a couple of Game and Fish, I think. So you'll see those, that Section 4 language to identify where the Land of Enchantment Program Fund money is. During the fiscal year, you need to keep track of this funding, right? Because it's going to be kind of included in your other funds budget. So make sure you keep track of it, however is best for you, like a department code, a reporting category, or other markers, because again, this is a 2-year distribution. Per the statute that created the Land of Enchantment Fund, it's valid for 2 years. So if you're getting $1 million, let's just say $1 million in FY26, technically you have through FY27 to spend it. So let's say in FY26 you spend $800,000 of that money. In FY27 you've got $200,000 left. You'll be able to rebudget that. You do it through a bar. Now, you can do that. However, we strongly encourage that you basically just treat these distributions as annual appropriations, because you get them every year, right? Even though they're technically valid for 2 years, just treat them as annual appropriations, spend them all in the first year that you get them, and then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so that's what we highly encourage you to do, is to just treat these as annual appropriations, spend it all every year, and that will make everything simple. Okay, and then allotment form, you will, just like last year, you need to include an allotment form for the Land of Enchantment Fund stuff, because the fund is distributed by DFA. Statute says that DFA is basically in control of this fund and sends out the distributions to the different agencies. So make sure you include an allotment form for your Land of Enchantment Fund appropriations. Okay, let's move on to revenue reconciliation. So there's, excuse me, there's only one revenue form per agency. So this one is not broken out by P codes or department codes or whatever. There's just one form for your whole agency. So for example, here you see the one for DFA. So you'll find it under your business unit. Okay, it looks pretty similar, as you can see, to the expenditure side forms, except here, of course, we're doing it on the account side, or excuse me, the revenue side. So you see your GA OPBUD, and then you can see your account transfers. So here again, this is where you can move line item budgets within the same revenue category and P code. You probably won't need to do much of this, right? Because for example, there's only one general fund account code, 499105, and you can't move that, right? Your general fund is your general fund. So The only reason you might do this is maybe some of your other state fund accounting code or line item codes, like if you have multiple ones there, or maybe a couple of federal account codes. But generally speaking, you probably won't need to do much in the account transfers column on the revenue side. Okay, but then of course you've got up top, you can see your categories and the transfer balances, so you can make sure that those are zeros. Okay, and see like C111, that's general fund. If you look at the first row there, it says C111 general fund appropriation. So you can make sure, obviously, don't move money into or out of your general fund. You cannot do that. So that should be pretty simple. Okay. Then you've got comp package. So this is where you're going to budget the revenue for your FY26 comp increases. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on a further slide. But just like in previous years, this works exactly the same. Whatever general fund you'll include or you're receiving for the comp package, you put that under 499905 because you're receiving it as a transfer from DFA. Okay, so your general fund goes under 499905 in the comp package column. And then if you're budgeting other revenue for the compensation package, like federal funds or other state funds or fund balance, then just put that under whatever revenue code it should go under. Okay, that is pertinent to your agency. Other adjustments, again, this is where you're mainly going to be using it to budget the revenue side of federal adjustments, either increases or decreases that you are adjusting per updated federal information. And then again, possibly gap adjustments, but those again are pretty rare. And if you think you need to do a gap adjustment, please reach out to your analyst first. Okay. And then you'll have your final appropriation to share column to show you what the budget will look like when it's loaded into share. And then the last column where you might need to do some adjustments is the recurring adjustments column. Well, there's only one adjustment that you need to make in this column. And again, just like in previous years, if you got that general fund compensation distribution, then you subtract it out of the line in the recurring adjustments column out of 499, you subtract it out of 499905 and you add it to 499105. Okay. Just a reminder, we need to do that because it needs to be budgeted in share as a transfer from DFA because that's how it's appropriated in House Bill 2. But then we need to move it going forward to kind of pure general fund so that it is built into your budget going forward when we start working on the FY27 budget request. Okay, so that's why we need to move it from 499905 to 499105 in the recurring adjustments column. Okay, but that's the only adjustment you should make in that column. Okay, so just a reminder of the different types of revenue. Oh, sorry, here, a column here. Did you say, or a question here, did you say that the other state funds should be put in the comp package column under 499950 as well? No, they should go under whatever the revenue is at your agency. So if you're budgeting as other state funds, 424302 or 475105 or whatever, then it should go under that same revenue code. Okay, and don't adjust anything in the recurring adjustments column. You're only adjusting general fund in the recurring adjustments column. There are some rare cases where you get transfer revenue that's not general fund related. So then you might have a situation where you've got the general fund comp package under 499105. Let me go back here. You've got the general fund comp package under 499905, and then maybe you receive some other transfer revenue from some other source, and then you might have another amount also under 499105, right? Or 905, I'm sorry. So in that case, then when you get to the recurring adjustments column, then you only move the amount that should be general fund up to 499105. Okay. Okay, just a reminder here of your different types of revenue. General fund, of course, include your general fund appropriations as reported on your report 3. Of course, this cannot be adjusted. Your general fund is your general fund as appropriated from the legislature. The compensation amounts that you're getting from the general fund are included on your comment sheet, so make sure you're budgeting that. And then just like we talked about, general fund received from 26 compensation appropriations should be budgeted as 499,905 in the compensation package column, and then moved to 499,105 in the recurring adjustments column. Okay. Federal revenue. So there are a few different, there are a few different revenue codes you might use here. Most commonly, you're going to be using 451903. That's going to direct grants and such from the federal government. There are a few other exceptions you're seeing there. We ask that you provide detail regarding grant names, purposes, and then, of course, any sort of adjustments that you are making. Include a recon form. And I'm just going to mention this. This is very, probably more so than in several years. This is very important this year, right? Okay. Several agencies are reporting issues with federal funding, cancellations of grants, and stuff like that. If you have received notice about federal funding that is going away, you need to take it out of your budget, okay? Because we cannot have you spending money that you don't have just because you have the budget authority to do it. So please take into account any reductions in your federal budget that you know about or anticipating or are anticipating for for fiscal year 2026, and budget them accordingly. Okay. And yeah, provide a recon sheet that basically just says, here is our federal budget as it was approved or put through in House Bill 2. Here are the adjustments that we are making to it, either positive or negative. And here's the net effect of how we are actually budgeting it. Okay. Make sure you do that. Don't be too afraid to decrease federal budgets. Remember, if something good happens during the fiscal year 2026 and you get word that you get a letter that this funding is being reinstated or something like that, we can always put it back in through a budget adjustment. Okay, that's a relatively simple thing to do. What we can't have is, got $5 million of budget authority, federal budget authority, and you're just spending, and that money doesn't come, or that money isn't there. And then at the end of the fiscal year, you've got your $5 million in the hole and you needed efficiency. Okay, that's what we need to avoid. So please be very careful of that. Non-general fund transfers. So these are basically the revenue side of those 500 category expenditures that we were talking about a little bit ago. So the revenue code that you use here is kind of the mirror image of the 500 expenditure code that appears on the expenditure side. So for example, if the transfer revenue is from another state agency, you use revenue code 499905. If it's between funds within an agency or from one P code to another P code, then the revenue side is 499906. And then very rarely, you might have a transfer from a component unit of the state, in which case it's 499999. Okay. And again, these need to balance out. Reciprocal transfers are where there is some sort of MOU or agreement or contract or whatever that specifies what the receiving agency is going to do with the money. Okay, and so usually the expending agency is doing this through a grant or a contract in a revenue code, an expenditure code like 475109 or something like that. Usually it ends in an 09. And here the receiving agency is going to have two possible revenue codes. So if it's a federal subaward received from another state agency, so if the money was originally federal in nature, okay, but then that agency that received the federal money is sending some of it to another agency. So say, for example, Department of Corrections gets some money and they want to send some money, they get some money from the feds. They want to send some money to Department of Health to do some sort of health program. Department of Health is going to recognize that revenue under 451-909. Okay? Federal subawards sent to some other agency. For basically anything else that was originally state money in nature, then you use 425-909. Other revenue is basically everything else, or we call it other state funds. Anything else that doesn't meet their criteria of what we talked about. So there's dozens of possible revenue codes that you might see here. This is your ticket sales, admissions, investment income, rentals, leases, fees, all that stuff is other state funds. If you generate revenue for activities that you do, it's usually some kind of other state funds. Okay. Remember that this is all other state funds in House Bill 2, but for budgeting purposes, you've got other revenue, which is like your recurring other state fund revenue, and then you've got fund balance, right, which is non-recurring other state revenue. So make sure you split that out accordingly. So again, you can budget under fund balances from certain special revenue funds. It's part of the other state funds appropriation. Make sure you aren't going over them, right? Your recurring other state fund revenue plus your budgeted fund balance needs to equal the other state funds column in House Bill 2. Unlike other revenue sources that start with a 4, fund balance revenue starts with a 3. And there's generally 4 different fund balance codes that you can use here. And they go from kind of most restricted and how they can be used to least restricted. So most restricted is 325-900, and then least restricted is 328-900, and those are the two that tend to be used most often. So be aware of that. Good way to, if you aren't sure what equity code here to use to budget your fund balance, probably the best way to do that is to go into share and print off a trial balance report for that fund in question. And then that should tell you, it should show you which of these account codes the fund balance for this fund is sitting in, so that you know which one to use in your budget. Okay, so now is just some other summary reports that you need to print off and include in your budget submission. These are all printed off from the BFM reporting module. Of course, your S8, probably the most important one, that is your financial summary at the revenue code level and the expenditure code level. So you see our expenditure category level, so you see them there. It shows your FTE. Of course, your total revenue has to equal your total expenditures. BFM will not let you submit an unbalanced budget, but make sure that everything is balanced. And then make sure the amount provides is the amount that you're budgeting amount matches the amount provided on the report 3, adjusted for compensation, federal funds, gap adjustments, etc. The S9 is very similar to the S8, but except that it shows each line item. Okay, so each revenue code line item and each expenditure code line item. So it's much more detailed, but otherwise it's the same thing as an S8 except at the detail level. So make sure you include an S8 and an S9 for each appropriated program and one for your agency as a whole. So if you only have one P code, right, then you only need one S8 and one S9. But if you have multiple P codes, then you need one for each P code and one for your agency as a whole. Okay, this is very important. This last bullet here. So there's kind of your general S8, but then there's also another one, S8 by fund level and S8 output by fund column / rows. Please include these. This helps us make sure that your funds are balanced, because it's kind of easy to not have, like if your agency has 10 different funds that you're budgeting from, it's kind of easy to mistakenly budget too much expenditures in one fund and not enough revenues. And then your funds are unbalanced, and we can't have that, right? Every fund that you're budgeting in needs to be balanced. So if you print these off and check them, you'll be able to make sure that the revenues and the expenditures in each fund that you are submitting or budgeting in balance out. Okay, so please check them, print them off, check them, make sure your funds all balance, and then include these reports in your budget submission. Okay. Next is your operating budget report, again, printed from BFM reporting. So if you get everything filled out correctly on all the forms that we've talked about, BFM will take all that information and it will create OPUD 3s for you. Okay, and this is what we use to sign off on and eventually become your budget journals in Share. So you want to print these off, you want to review them, make sure everything is going to be correct. It'll automatically populate stuff like bud refs and class codes. Make sure you print OPUD 3s for each P code, verify them, make sure everything is correct, sign them, and include them with your budget submission. Okay, and again, after we do our reviews, make any adjustments that you need to, they'll be used to generate budget journals in Share. So just as a reminder, again, you don't have to populate these, but they will always be in whole dollars and they'll be rounded to the nearest 100. Okay, so you see that there. Again, that matches how they will look in Share. All FY26 Section 4 appropriations will have a journal date, of course, of July 1st, 2025. Class code starting with a J and a budget reference code of 126. Okay, and then, of course, an allotment form for general fund, tobacco fund, land of enchantment. Sorry, I forgot to write that in there, but land of enchantment fund. Okay, all those special funds. Oh, an opioid fund. Sorry, so there's 4 now. General fund, tobacco funds, land of enchantment fund, or opioid settlement funds. All those funds need allotment request forms included with your budget submission. Should there be any initial budget numbers showing when I first enter BFM, such as baseline amounts? But reports don't show any numbers. There should be. We can take a look here afterward and see what's going on. Okay. So the next form is for allotment requests. We started doing this last year, but this is only for general fund allotments. If you have some of those other funds that need allotments, like I was just talking about, land of enchantment, tobacco, opioids, those you need to create manually outside of BFM, and those forms are on our website. This is to create your general fund allotments. So that's the 6900 form. Okay. Just like the revenue form, there's only one of these per agency. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to give you the total amount, and you need to copy it down and basically tell us how much money you're going to allocate to each of your P codes there. So you see the total amount to allocate, and then you just distribute it among your P codes. Okay, and you select copy to copy them down, and just make sure that you've got all your funds and all of your P codes covered. Okay. So you see here, this is the pop-up screen that you'll fill out. You select the appropriate fund, departments if you're doing department codes or department IDs, and then amount designated to each department code and fund, and then you select save. Okay. Then once you've done that, you'll see the 25-26 allocation amount will then be populated, and you'll see that the amount allocated should equal your amount to allocate. Okay, so go through this and make sure that you've got everything allocated to the funds that you want, to the department codes that you want, etc. And of course, then it balances out to your totals. And then print the allotment request form report for each P code from BFM reporting, sign and include with your submission. Okay. You don't need the agency roll up for this form because everything is done at the P code level. So there's no need to include an agency roll up. Okay. So just the P code 1 allotment request form report for each P code. Make sure up here at the top right should net to 0, right? So you want to make sure you allocate everything. So at the end, that should be 0. And you'll know that you've done it right. Okay, just kind of a summary. One department code for each allotment to a fund within a program code on your allotment form. You can allocate to multiple departments once the budget's been established. Only allocate to high level funds, not to sub funds. So sub funds are those funds that end in digits other than 00, so 05 or 07 or whatever. Please just allocate to your high level funds. And then unlike multiple appropriation allotments, for those non-recurring appropriations we'll be talking about, if you need allotment forms for that, then you can use a multiple allotment form that basically lets you put more than one budget on one allotment form. Well, we'll be talking about that in a minute. Should there be any performance measure forms completed? Not at this time. We'll start working on performance measures for FY27 in June and July. So at this time, nothing for performance measures. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about compensation appropriations. So the 2025 GAA, House Bill 2, provides for a 4% salary increase for state employees in FY26. Provides general fund amounts to fund those increases. Also provides for an amount from the Healthcare Affordability Fund to pay for costs associated with implementation of Senate Bill 376. I'll talk about that more in a minute. So if you are one of those agencies where you have kind of split funding, general fund plus other state funds or other funds, whatever, could be federal or fund balance or everything, you'll be provided basically the maximum amount. So let's say, and that's based on kind of a proportion of how you fund your PSNB. So let's say that you're a 50-50 agency, 50% general fund, 50% other funds, and it's going to cost you $1 million to fund this 4% increase. Your comment sheet would say, okay, the total cost for you to budget this 4% increase is $1 million. You will be provided $500,000 in general fund to do that. And then you need to basically come up with $500,000 from other funds. Okay, that could be from other recurring revenues, fund balance, federal funds, just money that you have available to fund those. Now, you don't necessarily have to budget that entire amount of other funds. You can budget up to that amount. But of course, you have to budget all of your general fund that you're receiving. Why wouldn't you, right? Budget all of it. But we're just going to give you one amount per agency. So if you have multiple P codes, it's up to you to distribute that among your P codes. So if you're getting $500,000 and general fund and you've got 3 P codes, then you need to figure out how to distribute that among your 3 P codes. Okay. We've already talked about number 3 here and how to do that. So then number 4, there's a general fund compensation distribution form, and that will show up that's on our website. You need to fill that out, and that provides information that that DFA needs to distribute the compensation appropriations, basically how much is going to each P code. Because like I said, we're just giving you an amount per agency. You tell us how much is going to each P code, and that way we know how much to send and how much to budget. Okay, so make sure you include that. And a few more notes about other compensation appropriations included in this year. Executive agencies, there's an amount that's carved out for longevity pay. There is no separate distribution for longevity pay. It's included in your 4% distribution. Okay, so there's no separate amount for that. Senate Bill 376. So this was passed, signed by the governor, and there is $78.5 million appropriated in Section 8 of House Bill 2 that is from the Healthcare Affordability Fund to cover the expenses in FY26 of implementing Senate Bill 376. So if you're not familiar with it, this is the law that will enable the Healthcare Authority to do away with the previous health insurance tiers, which is where the amount that you pay, you being an employee, pays for health insurance depends on your salary. The higher your salary, the greater percentage of health insurance premiums that you pay. That's gone away. Everybody will be basically now paying 20%, and the state's paying 80%. So pretty much everyone that pays health insurance will see more take-home pay. So anyway, in FY26, that's going to be covered from the Healthcare Affordability Fund. So you may have received, or you should be receiving, an email from your analyst. We need a little bit of information from you to determine how much to send you from the Healthcare Affordability Fund. And it's basically just how much are you currently budgeting or projecting to spend on health insurance in FY25. So if you got that email, please complete it and send it back to us as soon as possible, preferably today. I think it should not be very much work. It's basically just a couple of lines per P code. Please send that back to us by today. That way this week we can use that information to figure out how much we will providing your agency from the Healthcare Affordability Fund to pay for Senate Bill 376. Okay, so the goal is we will let you know that by next Monday, by a week from today, how much to budget from the Healthcare Affordability Fund for these costs, and they'll go into your budget 499905. Okay. Now, that's just for 1 year. That was a 1-year appropriation for Healthcare Affordability Fund. There's not enough money in the Healthcare Affordability Fund to fund this ongoing. So the related costs for Senate Bill 376 will need to be requested as general fund or other funds as part of your FY27 budget request. So we'll be talking about that later. You don't need to be worrying about that at this time right now, but just keep that in mind. That is something that we need to address when we move forward into FY27. Okay. Again, for executive agencies, there was also a $17 million appropriation to implement the classification and compensation study, basically moving to a single job architecture and all that stuff. The amounts to be distributed to agencies to implement this have not been determined yet. Sorry, I should have said determined there, not distributed. But anyway, we're going to apply the 4% first, make sure that's in place. And once these amounts are determined, we will come back and adjust budgets accordingly. The language is pretty broad and just says for FY26. So this might not be till after July 1st that we do that, but that's fine. So as soon as these amounts are determined, we'll come back with further instructions on how to do that. Hopefully we can do it all at once and we could just kind of like take care of it together. But again, that hasn't been determined yet. Just know that will be coming at a later date, probably this summer sometime. How much was approved for compensation increases and how much for benefits? Again, for comp increases and the amount of benefits that is tied to the 4% comp increases, it was about $96 million altogether. For executive agencies, it was $35 million in general fund, and the amount that you're getting of that will be on your comment sheet. So the amount that you know to budget that is that. And then for the benefits for Senate Bill 376, it was 78 million altogether, but we'll get the amount for your agency to you by next Monday. Okay, So this is for agencies that do department level budgets and share. If you don't do it, then you don't need to worry about this slide. But this is just a reminder that if you do department level budgets in share, then you can set them up basically independently at the department level appropriation unit, okay, or specific chart fields. Department level budgets are only for P codes. They're not for Z codes like non-recurring appropriations or anything like that. Again, we don't we only approve appropriation level budgets. SPD will review entries to ensure we're consistent. Obviously, if you're doing these department level budgets, you can't go above what was appropriated at the appropriation level or the P code level. So you create these journals yourselves in share using the AGY ledger type and your 10-digit department codes. Again, we can't produce department level UPA 3s from BFM, but you might find if you're preparing these department level budgets in share, it might be useful for you to extract the 7700 form. Remember, directly from the form, you can extract that information into Excel and use that information. If you budget at the department level in BFM, you can use that information to help construct your department level UPA 3 journals. But just remember, that's basically all up to you to create. And once we post your appropriation level journal in share, then you can go in and post your department level journals. Okay. Okay, let's move on to non-recurring appropriations, special and other appropriations. So for these, you use an OPUD 4 form. These are outside of BFM, and the forms are available on the website. Okay, these are for other sections other than section 9, which we'll be talking about. You complete the OPUD 4 form according to the instructions on our website. Remember to use actual dollars. Every appropriation, every non-recurring appropriation has a Z code associated with it. You can find that on the budget code table. We are working on finalizing the budget code table. It'll be finalized soon. Again, we couldn't finalize it until the budget was signed on Friday because we needed to account for vetoes and stuff like that. And the chapter number of the bill that we need to build into the description for every appropriation. So we're almost done with that. Once we get it done within the next week or so, we'll get all the codes entered into share, and then you can start submitting OPUD 4s to budget non-recurring appropriations in sections 5 through 11 that are valid in FY25. Okay, so the table of the budget codes will give you the right Z code, class code, bud ref, amounts, and make you aware of any sort of line item vetoes that occurred. Okay, of course, you need to complete share journals. If you don't know how to do all this stuff, refer to module 2 of Budget Bootcamp, where we go into a lot of detail about creating budget journals, completing OPUD 4 forms, and all that stuff. So you can find a lot more detailed information there. Okay. There is a multiple appropriation OPUD 4 form. So if you've got like 5 section 5 appropriations and you want to budget them all at once, you can do them on one form, which is nice, instead of 5 separate forms. So make sure you use that. And then, of course, make sure you submit a corresponding allotment request form for general funds, tobacco funds, or computer enhancement funds that you're budgeting. Okay, there's also, just like with the OPUD 4 form, there's a multiple allotment form that you can use as well if you're doing more than one at once. Okay, now we're on to non-recurring appropriation reauthorizations. So we're doing a couple new things this year with reauthorizations that we need to make you aware of. So again, this is for, you got budgeted a section 5 appropriation last year. You didn't spend it all, and so you asked for it to be reauthorized, extended through FY26, and that was included in this year's House Bill 2. So now you have authority to expend it through FY26. So there's a couple of things we want you to do. One is required, and that's the first one you see there. So when you are requesting to rebudget this through FY 26, you are required to submit budget decrease journals to zero out the remaining balance in the old class code and the old bud ref. Okay, so for example, you got one section 5 last year, so it probably had class code 92425, right? So now it was, oh sorry, 92424. So it was valid through FY 25. So if that's going away, then you just submit budget decrease journals to take away whatever budget you are not expending in the old bud ref, that 92424. Okay, and then you budget it under the new class code and the new bud ref. Okay, that will help us keep track of these, better track of these, and it will prevent this kind of ghost budget stacking that can happen if you aren't reducing the old budget authority and you just keep stacking them on top of each other. It can look like you've got more budget available than you actually do. So that's why we're requiring this, to take away that old budget authority that you're not going to be able to use. Okay. Next one is optional, but I would say encouraged. You can budget reauthorizations before June 30th. Okay. But of course, you want to do the same thing where you're taking out the budget, because you're not going to be able to, you don't want to be able to spend out of both of them, right? So decrease your old budget and reauthorize your new budget your own new one. Of course, make sure that all your transactions using your old class code and bud ref are complete before doing so, right? You need to zero everything out and be ready to move everything over to the new one. And because of this, all reauthorizations will have the bud ref 92524 to account for the possibility of budgeting the extension in the closing months of FY 25. What is the time frame on when we need to submit the budget decrease journals to zero out these reauthorizations? Whenever you are ready to reauthorize the budget, then you need to submit at the same time, you need to submit the decreases. Okay, so again, this could be prior to June 30th. If you're ready to do it then, or if you're going to wait until July, then it should be, as soon as possible after July 1st when you're ready to start budgeting under the new bud ref. Let's see, this new requirement is only to reduce FY 25 924 bud ref budget. Basically, it's, yeah, you could say that. It's basically for any existing budget that is going away in FY 25, but has been reauthorized for FY 26 for these non-recurring appropriations, right? So it's mostly, it's mostly going to be things that are, 92424. The only kind of rare exception would be something that was a multi-year appropriation that is going away in FY 25 and being extended through FY 26. There you might have some other weird bud ref code, but basically in most cases it's going to be 92424 or 925, right? But basically anything that's ending in FY 25. Okay. Will the forms in BFM be available soon? I logged in, but none of the forms are available yet. Yeah, they should be available. We'll check after training here to make sure everything is good to go. Okay. Due dates for submitting non-recurring op-ed 4s. So appropriations for submitting in section 8, excuse me, section 6 of House Bill 2. Again, these are your supplemental or deficiency appropriations that are only valid in FY 25. So we want to be sure that these are budgeted quickly. They follow the exact same process as any other non-recurring appropriation, but you should submit them by May 16th, 2025, okay? Because they need to be taken care of quickly, okay? Appropriations in section 5 of 2025 GA, those should be submitted, as generally as soon as possible once, if they're valid in FY 25, once we tell you that the code table is ready and all the codes are in share. But the latest we want to see those submitted is September 1st. And then there are some non-recurring appropriations that will say for fiscal year 2026 or in fiscal year 2026. Pay attention to these. I would say there's more of these than in the past few years where they are not valid until FY26. So you can't budget them before FY26. So those should be submitted in between July 1st and September 1st. Okay. And then last, section 7. So those are your C2 appropriations. Those aren't subject to a deadline because they're more beholden to the PCC process. To release project funds, the PCC committee needs to certify funding. If you have any questions about that process, reach out to DeWitt in the Enterprise Management Office. They'll guide you through that. But basically, once the PCC releases a certain amount of Section 7 funding for a certain project, then you'll have a letter saying that. And then we will let you budget that amount. Okay, Section 9, Grow Fund. If you have these Section 9 appropriations, it's in one way it's similar to last year, but in another way it's different in that there's no Section 9D this year, which were basically those kind of junior bill-esque appropriations. There's none of that this year because those Section 9D appropriations were valid in FY25 and FY26. So you're still spending those. However, there still are pilot project appropriations in Section 9A, 9B, and 9C. So Section 9A, our appropriations are valid in FY26. 9B and 9C are for 27 and 28, so those aren't to be budgeted yet. However, you have to think about last year. So if you received grow appropriations from Section 9B of last year, those are valid for FY26. So basically, we are budgeting 2 sets of appropriations from the Grow Fund this year. We're budgeting Section 9A from the 2025 GAA, Chapter 160, and we are budgeting Section 9B from the 2024 GAA, Chapter 69. Okay, so those are the 2 possible Grow sections that we are funding this year. Next year, it'll be 3 sections, but we're not that far yet. So your analyst, we're going to do this similar. These are all valid as a fiscal year, for 26 from July 1st to June 30th of FY26. So we'll do this similarly to what we did last year. Your analyst will provide you a list of Grow Fund appropriations in Excel for your agency, including the Z codes and the other information. You need to, with your May 1st budget submission, break out each appropriation by expenditure category and fund. Of course, the expenditure category needs to be consistent with the appropriation language, what it says you have to spend this money on, like you were budgeting any non-recurring appropriation. Make sure you budget it accordingly. Include a copy of that list, completed list, in your budget submission. Email the Excel file back to your analyst. We'll take all that information and we will use it to build budget journals, one mass budget journal, and we will load it into Share, and it'll be valid on July 1st. So you won't have to do any further action in Share to budget these Grow Fund appropriations. They will be valid on July 1st for you. Okay. And again, we will take care of the revenue side. They'll be budgeted under 499905. But again, because the Grow Fund is distributed by DFA, you need to include a allotment request form for Grow Fund appropriations in your budget submission. So make sure you include those on May 1st as well for anything you're receiving from the Grow Fund. Other required forms, the certification, again, that's produced from BFM using info populated on the 9900 form. Automatically indicate whether you're using department level budgeting. Org chart, again, that's just whatever you have handy. It's from outside of BFM. And the position extension certification, it's Excel spreadsheet posted on the state budget website. Again, you don't submit a part for every term position being extended. It's just one spreadsheet. Okay, last slide here before we take a short break. Just as a reminder, the end of year bar submission deadline is June 6th. So if you have any bars to submit, please take care of those. Submit them by June 6th. It's a little later than previous years to give you a little bit more time to try to get those things in. Operating budget workshops are next week. So if you would like some help from the state budget division analysts, some in-person help completing your output submissions, please sign up for these. You don't have to sign up for a specific time or anything. We just need some kind of approximate head counts of how many people will be showing up to each workshop. So again, information from this was in the operating budget notice. But if you'd like to do that, sign up. April 22nd is in Albuquerque in the Tiwa building downtown, April 24th in Santa Fe at the State Library. So yes, please sign up by this Friday if you would like to attend. Okay, and then of course you've got a future training opportunities here, budget boot camp, budget projections, bar training. Those will all be coming up this summer. Hey, any questions before we take a short break and then go into BFM? Okay, not seeing any questions. Let's take about a 10-minute break. We'll definitely be started here again by 10:40. Okay, so and I'll be around if you want to drop any questions and chat in the meantime. Thanks. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. This is unfortunately going to be short because I realized that, and the folks who pointed out are correct that unfortunately the BFM forms haven't rolled over yet. So I called Ralph during the break here, and he's working on it. So they should be rolled over soon. But unfortunately, that means I can't actually show you the forms in BFM yet because even I don't have access to the operating budget forms yet. I can't show you the reports, so I'll show you that here in a few minutes. However, I can't just show you. I just can't show you kind of a walkthrough of the operating budget forms that we talked about during the slides yet. So sorry about that. So if you would like to come back and see that in a future training. We should have them ready to go by this afternoon. Just click on the email, click on the link in the form, and then the notice you got to sign up for it, to register. And you don't have to come for the whole thing if you don't want to. We'll probably get to BFM around between 2:45 and 3 o'clock this afternoon. Or if that doesn't work for you, the training's tomorrow. If you would like to come back and see the forms in BFM, or of course, we will also record those trainings and you'll then post those on the website. We won't post this one that doesn't have the BFM tour on it. So we will post one of those trainings and they will be on our website as well, hopefully by end of day tomorrow or Wednesday, like I said. So sorry about that. We should get it hopefully by this afternoon. They will be good to go and you'll be able to get into BFM. So real quick, let me just show you a couple things and then we'll wrap things up and you can ask any questions that you would like. This is just showing you our website here, the operating budget instructions of the website. The code table, once we get it done, we'll go here. We'll also email it out to you. Again, those are for all the non-recurring appropriations, all the Z codes, bud refs, class codes, etc. So it'll be here for reference and also we'll email it to you. And then here's all your forms and instructions that you might need. We talked about all of these during the training. Here's your output fours, your position extension certification. Remember, if you have those term positions, I need to put them all on a spreadsheet. So here's that. And then the instructions. This PowerPoint is here. And then PowerPoint is here, right here. And then once we have the recording, it'll be here down at the bottom. The instructions document here, that's kind of a Word version of the PowerPoint. It just goes into more detail than the PowerPoints. If you want to print that out, that's also updated. Your general fund compensation distribution, allotment requests, the checklist to go through, make sure you're including everything. Just make sure you include all that stuff. Okay, so that's where to find all this stuff on our website. So again, BFM. One thing I can show you is the reports. So again, for reporting, you go under links to BFM reporting. That'll take you here. It'll pop up in a new tab. So you're going to be looking under agency reports 3.2 UPBUD cycle. So this will show you all the reports that you need to submit your S8 UPBUD. Remember, these are very important here. Your S8 UPBUD by fund column and rows, by fund level. These are very important for us to see that all your funds that you're budgeting in are balanced. S9, transfers, FTE, UPBUD 3. Sorry, let's just take a look click on UPBUD 3. Refresh values, of course, you should just be able to see yours. So let's do, I don't know, para. And yeah, they don't have it updated yet. So anyway, once we get this stuff rolled over, they'll all populate with all your stuff. So anyway, that's where to find all of your reports. To go back, I'm going to click on documents. I'm going to go back here, save stuff. You can print and save here. So just remember that. And yeah, so here's all of the reports that you need to print from BFM. So make sure you're printing everything that you need here and anything you need from outside of BFM according to the checklist. That is applicable to your agency. Okay. So again, apologies, I can't show you the forms. We'll cover them in training later, but it's just as it is, as we covered in the training slides. So, use those and be sure to come back or email your analyst any questions you have over the next 2.5 weeks. Of course, we are all here to help you get this done by May 1st, by close of business on May 1st. And yeah, we are here. And do we have any questions before we wrap up for this morning? Okay, yeah. Can you demonstrate S13 report to include only the accounts we need to report? Sure. So for the S13 report, you click on it here, it says S13 UpBud. Okay, so for example, just click on yours. So put the arrow here to put that over here. And then P code, of course, they did 253, so we do 253. Okay, then click on account, refresh values, and it'll show you like everything. So you'll want to scroll down to the 500s, right? You'll see them down here. You can also search, right? If I type in that amount codes that I need, I'll just move it over, right? So let's say, and again, the kind of power of this one is that you can do it for whatever account codes that you want, and you can do it for multiple ones. So just print off of the ones for the account codes that are on that slide that say, the specific rate line items that we want. But let's say I was, interested in my utilities, right? Like I could put all the utilities on there. So you just add like that, all of the account codes, either by typing them in this box or by putting them over here. Okay. So once I have all the line items in this box that I want, just click OK. And again, it's not going to show anything because the data hasn't been moved, but that would populate for you once everything gets go. So that's how you run an S13 for whatever line items that you want. Anything else? All right, thank you everyone. Again, sorry for the lack of BFM, but that should be on by this afternoon. If you want to come back or tomorrow, please feel free. We've got plenty of room for folks who wanted to take the training more than once. So otherwise, yeah, please, I'll stick around for a few more minutes if anybody else has any questions. But otherwise, we'll let you know as soon as BFM is ready to go. All right, thanks everyone. Yeah, we will let you know. Your analyst will let you know. Yeah, if you need the email to sign up for a future session, please email your analyst and they'll get it to you.